Evening, good morning. Welcome to week 5 of PSSL 6240. Before we get started, I am taping this on Memorial Day, so I just want to extend to you and your families, especially those who have served, a good holiday today, and just to remember those who we've lost not just these past 13 years, but throughout our country's history. So I just wanted to take some quick second to just remember that. Moving on to kind of the papers. All the papers have been marked. I will be honest with you. I think we need some work on our writing. Writing is probably the most, as you progress higher in government and in your related fields, writing becomes much more important. And I think we all can use some work on our writing. And I think there were some issues with paper 1. I put some kind of notes on all of that, but just some of the key points or key criticisms I have. And the first and most important is there's too much fluff in your papers. Get to the point. I think some people might have struggled to reach that 1,800 to 2,000 word requirement. And I can tell you right now, if you struggled to do that, you did not do your research. You did not do enough background. You did not do enough analysis on your paper. Again, these are not, college, you might have been able to get away with it. You will not be able to get away with it in this grad program. And you will certainly not be able to get away with it as you progress in your career. So, there was far too much fluff in your papers for paper 1. There's too much history. I got it. I know what happened at Fort Hood. I know what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I know, if there's a terrorist incident, I know what it is. I don't need background on it. I need you to get, for the paper 1 and for subsequent papers, I need you to get to your point of analysis. You need to get to your argument fast. I need to know what your thesis is, and I need to know that every one of your headings, subheadings, paragraphs support that thesis. So everyone needs to work on that. That's something that we need to work on for the remainder of this course and the remainder of this program as well. Next, just use headings and subheadings. Some of you did, a lot of you didn't. When you get to grad school, you're expected to use subheadings and headings in your papers, just so they see your categorize and how you organize your paper and your thoughts. So please use them in your papers from here on in. And then finally, this should be obvious, but show that you watch the lectures. People need to do that in their discussions as well as their papers. A lot of people did Fort Hood. The counter arguments were listed in the lecture for the Fort Hood massacre. And a lot of people didn't use that. Don't copy the lectures, but at least show that you listen to the lectures and relate to the material. If you disagree that Fort Hood should be included in terrorism, say, hey, according to Professor Sharma, he said this. However, I disagree. So show me that you actually listen to the lectures. And those are kind of the high points. I also made corrections on some of the other points as well, but overall, I know this might be a lot of people's first papers since college, but as you progress in your careers and progress in this program, the writing becomes that much more important. So for this paper coming up, and it's due on Sunday, the best way to think about it is, you're working as an intel analyst, or you work in the governor's, national security, Homeland Security Department, and he reads one of the articles assigned. And you have is 2 articles. Choose one and write a paper on it. And one is a scenario on Syrian sarin use by terrorists. The other is ricin used by terrorists. So you work for the governor of New York. He reads that article, and he's going to turn to someone like you and say, write me a paper tomorrow and tell me if this is something I need to be worried about. So yeah, it's designed to be a quick turnaround. 1,500 words, no more than 1,500 words, concise, to the point and back it up with an argument. Say, yes, we need to worry about this, or no, we don't need to worry about this. And that's the best way to think about it. Like your real world situation, maybe you work in the intelligence community, maybe you work in the state level. Some guy says, boom, I need an answer by this tomorrow, and you get to it. Short, concise, get to the point. I do want you to talk science in these papers because there is scientific issues related to each one of the scenarios. However, do not give me the PhD molecular organic chemistry science behind this, as I've gotten in previous papers. Explain how the science, whether it's the production of ricin or the movement of serin, explain how that might impact me from a policy level. Explain how that might make the terrorist attack that much more hard to do. All right, so each one of these, there's a scientific issue behind each one. You'll have to do a little bit of research behind it, but don't give me the science details. Just give me how the science will impact the employment of ricin in scenario 1 or sarin in scenario 2. And then again, use argument to back up your thesis. Again, every word for a paper this short should earn its way onto your paper, and every word should back up your argument one way or another. So again, don't give me fluff, don't give me these long roadmaps. Every word, every paragraph has to back up your initial findings. So again, short, concise, every word's got to count. And then finally, use counter arguments in this. Just like you did for paper 1, use your counter arguments. If you think that sarin is not a threat to the U.S. homeland, or sarin in Syria is not a threat to the U.S. homeland, be prepared to people to call you on that, to say no, it is a threat, and be prepared to give whoever's going to read that paper some counter arguments, so that when he gets questioned on it, when he or she gets questioned on it, they can respond in kind. So again, you should have counter arguments here. So that's kind of where I'm going with paper 2. If there's any questions or issues, please let me know. But again, short, concise, get to the point. Pretend it's kind of a real-world situation. So just going over last week, terrorist adaptation. Just some things. I think some of the readings were good. The readings were thick. I think some of the discussion was good. One thing and it's going to very likely come up on your final is what were the variables between these groups that led Shinrikyo to be unsuccessful, why Hezbollah to be successful? What were the why is Hezbollah successful? Why is Hamas successful? Why is Shinrikyo pretty much done? Why was the IRA successful in some ways and not successful in others? So for your discussion points, you focused on one group, but you should be familiar with all 4 groups. You should read what your classmates say. You should definitely read what are in the readings, and you should be able to answer those questions. And those may or may not come up on your final, but be kind of familiar with all 4 groups and organizations and why they will succeed. What are the variables that led to success or failure? And then we talked WMD terrorism. I hope you took away from my lecture and from the readings and the videos that WMD terrorism is a lot harder than some have made it out to be, especially when you're talking about the run-up to the Iraq War, how I think people were too fast and loose with the truth and might have scared the crap out of people, thinking that WMD terrorism was something very easy. In fact, it's very hard. Very hard to do, very hard to execute. I think about these scenarios for my day job all the time, and I know that it's not something that's very easy to do. Shinrikyo, again, and I talked to Shinrikyo vice Al-Qaeda, and I think that illustrated the point that Shinrikyo had massive financial resources, massive freedom of movement. They did not have to worry about transporting their pathogens and their chemicals around. Yet with hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, all they can do was a pretty hasty sarin attack. So it's not as easy as some are making out to be. With that being said, it can be done, and there's ways. Again, I talked about in the scenarios, and you saw in the videos that it can be employed, whether it was Om Shinrikyo or the Rajneeshis, or even the scenarios that you bring up in your paper. So that's all I'm going to kind of hit on the WMD point, and I look forward to what your papers had to say about that. For next week, counterterrorism strategy. We look two ways. We look comparative, particularly focused on Israel, but we also, the video I assigned touches on India, Spain, and Russia as well. And then we focus on the U.S. Particularly post 9/11. What we did well, what we didn't do well, what did Obama do well, what did Obama continue, and the question you have to ask is, well, two questions. Was it successful? And did you limit it in costs, whether it costs being collateral damage, whether it's cost being financial resources to deal with a threat? So think about that, when you're looking at U.S. counterterrorism or counterterrorism from multiple perspectives. I did email out the Zakaria article. That's an additional reading for this week as well. And you'll also see for this week, again, you'll have my lecture, and then you'll also have a lecture that I've assigned from Professor Gora, who talks about these counter-terrorism perspectives, as well as the rule of law and proportionality in counterterrorism as well. So I appreciate everyone. I just got back from Qatar, interesting trip. And I can talk at the next Adobe Connect session on that in more detail. Just one more announcement, related to the Adobe Connect session. That will occur on week 7, and that will be 2 weeks from Thursday. What we'll do is same setup as before, and we'll talk papers, we'll talk final, and we'll talk about careers in the national security field and the federal government. So if there's any questions or issues, please let me know, and I look forward again to reading your papers.